The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
I do. So, because I'm never going to use this much, I call this meeting to order.
Grab push it around.
I believe I started it. It didn't make the announcement.
It did, you couldn't hear it. Okay, so we are, just apologies, I want to make sure we are now broadcasting to the public.
We are live and ready. So thank you, everybody, for attending this year's Debt Affordability Advisory Committee. Particularly want to recognize Auditor Bullock with me, Secretary Revenue Wooten, State Controller Roseland, and all the staff for being here. Thank you for those attending online, including Ms. Walker as well. With that, why don't we call the roll?
Okay. This is Cindy Aiken, Assistant General Counsel. And we'll start with Auditor Bullock.
I'm present.
He's in the room. And Budget Director Walker.
I'm here.
He is. Thank you. Secretary Wooten.
Present.
And Controller Roseland.
Present.
And Mr. Akmus.
Yes.
He is here. And Mr. Cianelli.
Present.
Everybody's and Mr. Pomeroy.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Everybody's got their camera on. It's great. And Treasurer Briner.
Here.
In the room. So we have attendance, one vacant seat, so we have 8 in attendance. Just quickly, our staff is State and Local Government Finance Director Debbie Tomasco, Louis Andrews back with us on contract with our division. Got Lindy and MJ back here doing audio visual. Is Carolyn online?
Right, I did want to make sure we acknowledge Carolyn Hayden is our current interim director of state debt management. She's with us virtually. There we go. And we also have Frank Bowen, our transportation analyst, with us.
Thank you, Deb. And just quickly, old hat for most everybody. We'll be recording the meeting proceedings, and the recording will be made available to the public on our website. If everyone will please remember to identify yourself when you're speaking, and those on virtual participation, please mute yourself if you're not speaking. Let's see. Not much on the agenda, the same as always. We have minutes and a draft to review. Since we have some participating by remote means, if we will have all the votes taken by roll call. Without objections, a motion and a second will be considered as a yes vote unless you want to change your mind during the roll call. And that wraps it up.
All right. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and the salute to the North Carolina flag, please? Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I salute the flag of North Carolina, which is pledged to the old North State, love, loyalty, and faith. Thank you. So you've all had a chance to review the minutes from the January 24th, 2024 meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion of the minutes? With that, proceed to call the roll.
All right. January 24 minutes, motion Roseland, second Bullock. Director Walker?
Aye.
Thank you. Secretary Wooten?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Akmus?
Aye.
Mr. Cianelli?
Aye.
Mr. Pomeroy?
Aye.
And Treasurer Briner?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. With that, over to the main topic. To you.
Thank you, Treasurer. Good afternoon, members, and thank you for participating this afternoon. We're going to present to you this year's debt affordability study. I do want to recognize again Carolyn Hayden, who did develop this report. She's unable to participate today, but wanted to thank her for her efforts on this. Also, again, Louis Andrews and Frank Bowen for their efforts in putting this report together. Treasurer, without objection, I would say as we go through it, I'd be happy to take questions. Staff's happy to take questions instead of waiting till the conclusion. So we'll pause as we go through it. The presentation will just be a summary of the contents of the report. At the end, we will be asking for a vote to approve the report, which will also reaffirm the guidelines that have been established by the committee in the past and which staff is again recommending for approval by the committee. And we will share.
Are you ready?
Yes, we will share this online as we go.
Sorry about the That's the deck.
Social mascot. And again, just welcoming all of our members to the committee this year. Next slide. As our members who have been with us are aware, and I'm sure our new members are aware, the Debt Affordability Advisory Committee was established in legislation in actually 2004. And the committee has specific directives through the legislation, including the development of the debt affordability study annually, which will be presented to the governor and the General Assembly. There are a number of requirements in statute for what the study should cover, and those are included in the report and also in the slide that we're trying to display for you.
I'm a little glitch here.
Well, we will go, I can cross-reference there we go. Okay. So, whoops. I don't see it in the room, but for the participants remotely, they should be seeing it right now. Yes, Mr. Shinelli is shaking his head. So we will, for those who have the draft report, well, we'll move on. So the debt apologies to the folks in the room. Folks who are, again, participating virtually are able to see the slides. We'll continue working on trying to bring those up for the folks in the room.
Oh, okay.
The directives under statute are included in the study and include establishing guidelines for evaluating the state's debt burden and also making recommendations on debt management policies for the state. We'll give a little bit of background on the study and the guidelines and what the calculated capacity is based on those guidelines. So just as a reminder, what debt affordability essentially is the amount of debt that can be prudently authorized and issued without negatively affecting the credit position or impairing the budget flexibility of the issuer. Obviously, capacity is finite, so we are using that capacity to measure and compare our debt, both with levels we've established in the guidelines and with other states. It would be good to, how are we doing, to get some of the graphs up here? Yeah.
It's,
The people online can see this.
The people online can see the slides. It's just
We
the
have hard
folks.
copies.
And I'm, yes, okay, do we have hard copies of the
Good.
slides? Okay.
Okay. Control Rosalind. There we go.
Thank you very much.
So I think
Okay.
we're okay.
Okay, excellent. So we are, MJ, if we could forward, please, on the slides being broadcast. And I'm going to number 2, background. There we go. Okay, so this table provides a summary of the outstanding debt by type. It's broken down into net general obligation bonds, net tax supported special indebtedness, and then some other groupings of text, including Turnpike Authority, gap funded appropriation bonds, and other debt-like obligations. Total debt outstanding, both general fund and transportation tax supported debt, is just over $7.3 billion. We have in the general obligation category, those general fund bonds include Connect NC bonds outstanding, and the special indebtedness includes some of the Highway Transportation Fund appropriated Build NC bonds. So that's a summary of the existing and outstanding total debt, again, coming in just over $7.36 billion. The next page is just a graphic illustrating those same totals. Again, you'll see transportation and higher education take the two largest shares. This is the first year that that transportation has become number one in those percentages due to a pay down of some general fund debt and the continuing issuance of Build NC debt. There we go. Okay, excellent. We're all there are slides in the room now as well. Excellent. Again, this is just a graphical representation of what we discussed previously, which is the total outstanding debt, tax-supported state debt. Any questions on any of those graphics or any of those numbers? And I would ask, and again, Lewis is, for members who have been here a few years, are familiar with Lewis and his work. And so, Lewis, if you have anything that you feel I've missed, feel free to jump in.
Okay.
On to the next slide then. We consider our peer group, the other states with a AAA rating. Back in around 2005 or so, when the first reports were issued and the committee was formed, there were about 8 AAA states. We're now up to 15. But for purposes of comparison, we consider this our peer group. And so these are the other states, the other 14 states that have that AAA rating. Next slide, please. The committee has previously established a target of 4% for general fund debt for the ratio of debt service to revenue, 4% ratio. This table illustrates over the next 5 years what that target, what that ratio looks like. Again, the general fund established a 4% target for general fund debt and 6% target for transportation supported debt. So that's what you have there on the general fund line and the transportation line. Again, those are conforming, and you'll see they're under those 4% and 6% targets. The last line, the combined ratio, that is not a target that's been established by the committee. We just provide that for informational purposes. But those are the projected ratios over the next 5 years. And these ratios are based on authorized, outstanding and authorized and unissued debt. So that'll be the upcoming, for transportation, that'll include the upcoming sales in the spring, as well as the authorized but unissued transportation debt under the Build NC program. Next slide. So again, looking at some of the metrics that the committee and guidelines that the committee has established in the past, the first metric is the percentage of the debt as a percentage of personal income. The target was 2.5% with a not to exceed of 3%. And you'll see that since 2020 and looking forward through to 2029, those levels, those ratios are well below that target, and especially the not to exceed amount. We're hovering well below 1% over the next 5 years. So that's that first metric that the committee again has established. Next slide, please. Another metric established by the committee or guideline established by the committee is the debt service as a percentage of revenues. Again, this is after a recommended $100 million contribution to the solvency fund. So a few assumptions in the model that was developed. We continue the calculation of 4% of debt to revenues as a governing metric. Again, we're looking at a 10-year horizon that's, again, defined, required by statute. We're looking at all outstanding and to be issued debt. And right now, again, there are no general fund supported authorized but unissued debt at this point. Few other assumptions there. Again, 20-year maturity structure, assuming a 6% interest rate, overall level debt service. The capacity results, again, that we'll show you are both on a by-year and optimized basis. So again, I think you all are familiar with this. If the amount was, maximum amount was taken the first year with lower amounts in out years versus doing a level issuance over the next 10 years. And you'll see that in the upcoming slides. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see what the general fund capacity looks like given that 4% target. Again, starting in 2025, you've got the two lines, the total additional debt capacity per year, and the line below that is the debt capacity available each and every year. Again, just two different ways of projecting that, both on a each and every year basis or issuing more in the first year and less in out years. So that's, again, and this is general fund only and using that 4% target ratio to develop that capacity. Is there any questions on that, since that's one of the key components of the report?
Did this committee, or is it a legislative action or is it just the treasurer's own decision for the $100 million contribution to the unfunded liabilities?
It's been a recommendation of this committee, and I believe we'll touch on that later in other recommendations.
I read through it. I just wanted to make sure I understood whose recommendation that was.
So that came probably 6 or 7 years ago. And got some traction initially, a little bit less traction. This is the second year, you saw the 40 numbers. And then it's been a recommendation of the committee that's not been taken up by the General Assembly ever since.
Okay.
We'll talk a lot about the different OPEB liabilities and their relation to all this here in a little bit. Speaks to that.
Next slide, please. And we're up to the third metric now, established by the committee, which is the amount of debt to be retired over the next 10 years. The target is no less than 55%, and it should not decline below 50%. Essentially, this is looking each year, one more please, MJ, looking each year at the amount of debt that will be paid off in the next 10 years. One more slide. Yep, there we go. So again, this is a metric set the target's established at 55%. Again, for each year, we're looking out at how much debt will be paid off in the next 10 years. So the graph shows that around 2029, actually by 2039, the debt will be paid. It's hard to tell. This graph doesn't have the granularity to see, but essentially, if there are no new authorizations, the general fund debt service will be zero by the end of 2039. So we're closing in on that 100% number, and the graph looks as if it is, but in 2039 is when that number would be reached. But again, we're this year in 2024, looking ahead, the state will have paid off 85% of total general fund outstanding in the next 10 years. And that number will just continue to climb until, again, in 2039, assuming no new issuance, that will be paid off. Next slide. This is a graph of the general fund, the committee hasn't established any targets or floors, but generally we've just monitor this and report this out on an annual basis. So this is just included for information and as a reminder of that. We do know that rating agencies are interested in what kind of, quote, rainy day fund is available. And as of June 30th of 24, the reserve fund was at approximately $4.7 billion. So again, not an established metric, but a data point that staff does monitor. Next slide. Transitioning now to transportation funds. As we speak about transportation funds, we're talking about both the highway fund and the highway trust fund combined. And so these next couple of slides and looking at these next few metrics, we are looking at debt supported by transportation funds. So the metric here, when we were talking about general fund debt, the committee had established a 4% target ratio for debt to revenue. For transportation, it's a 6% ratio that's been established by the committee of debt to revenues. Again, in the model assumptions, just to highlight a few things in the model assumptions, this assumes a 4% interest rate and a 15-year maturity, and that's because of the difference in the debt that's being issued here versus general fund. And we do have, this does account for all of the authorized and unissued Build NC debt. From the Build NC bonds, there's $3 billion authorized through that. There's been $1.3 billion issued through June 20th of that amount. So this does account for the authorized and unissued amount of $1.7 billion. We do know there will be also a sale in the spring. We're looking at a sale in April for some build for $300 million in Build NC bonds. That'll be going before the Council of State coming up here in the next few months. So those assumptions are all built in since that amount has been authorized by the General Assembly. Next slide. Again, looking at that 10-year horizon, using that 6% ratio of debt service to revenues. Same two scenarios. First is showing the amount, the capacity hitting that first year wholly, and then lesser amounts in out years. And the second line showing what that capacity looks like each and every year over the next 10 years. Any questions on that capacity again? Core components of this report. Okay, next slide, please. We talked a little bit before about North Carolina's peer group and other AAA rated states. North Carolina continues its AAA rating. They were reaffirmed in 2024 by the three agencies. There's some notes here on the slide about some of the factors that the rating agencies have indicated could lead to a downgrade. Those are provided on the slide there. Overall, though, again, we've been reaffirmed, and we were reaffirmed in 2024 with that AAA rating from all three agencies. And next slide, and that's really a summary of the report. These are other recommendations. Again, these carry over. These are not new recommendations. These are recommendations that the committee has made in prior years, and we've included in the report. First is that control. The first recommendation is that the control of debt authorization and management is a credit strength and should remain a prerogative of the General Assembly. The second speaks to state aid intercept and the opposition of the committee to that state aid intercept. The third speaks to the preference for general obligation, voter authorized debt being the preferred but not exclusive financing vehicle for capital needs of the state. The fourth talks about the support for a structural balanced budget and also replenishment of reserves as a priority. And finally, the the recommendation that reliance on continuing resolutions should be an anomaly. Again, this is just a reiteration of prior year recommendations that were made by the committee. Next slide speaks to our comparison among our peer groups. Again, our peer group being those other 14 states that have AAA ratings, and where we stand on some of the key pension metrics based on Moody's report. We do show that we did have adjusted net pension liability decreased as a percent of GDP decreased to 1.2% from 1.8%, and North Carolina remains fairly low, fairly below the peer median and average for both of those metrics. As you can see, it's a little hard to see in the slide where we're highlighted there, but we are about 5-6 lines down there in blue. But again, that provides some background on the pension.
Yeah, maybe an editorial comment or two on the pension liability. So this is just the TSERS pension. The local government pensions would be separate and apart from this because they're not the obligations of the state, but the obligations of the local pensions. We are roughly 89% funded is where we think we'll end the year, which is a relatively strong funding ratio. We're going to talk about the OPEB liability, which is the state health plan liability, separately, and you should think of that differently. The pension liability is the closest thing to debt that we don't call debt in the state. It's very easily determined mathematically. There's some assumptions into that, but it isn't a general obligation of the state. So we should think about this in the context of the broader debt discussion here. I think 10 years ago when I started on this committee, we didn't talk about it. We talked about all the debt the state had. Now that the debt of the state is disappearing, at least in a formal sense, these liabilities come to the front as they are much bigger and things that we'll have to worry about. And then I guess we're going to OPEB next. I'll do the same there.
Yes, next slide, please. And again, a comparison of the key OPEB metrics here versus our peer group, those other 14 AAA rated states. North Carolina does continue to trend above the median and average peer group metrics, but our net OPEB liability has increased about $26 billion to $26 billion from $23 billion.
So a couple things to highlight on this chart, or low light chart, I suppose. We are an exceptionally well-managed state fiscally in so many ways, but this is just not one of them. So we are laser focused on trying to address these challenges, but they are not easy challenges to address. As you see, we are 11.5% funded on this relative to the 89% funded on the pension plan. So the pension plan is in good shape, but 11.5% funded is not where we need to be here. The liability for the state health plan, you'll see this on the next page of the study that shows you how the liability changes year over year. It's very sensitive to any number of assumptions. And so it is much harder to determine this liability with precision than the pension liability. But suffice it to say, it is a very large liability for the state and that we need to be focused on. If you flip to that, and I don't know if you have the slides, but in the study, you'll see the reconciliation of the net OPEB liability, which is table 7 in the study. What I want to point out here is we've gone from this is the gross liability of 26 billion to 34 billion in a single year. We show you in the arrows how that happens. Let's just focus on the biggest of those. The red arrow is a change to the Medicare Advantage premiums. That came to rise because of the Inflation Reduction Act, which capped out-of-pocket expenses for Medicare Advantage members, which then in turn caused our insurers who were going to absorb that cost to push that cost onto us. And so this is the present value of that change, which is an enormous number. In the headlines also in the last year has been the decision by the State Health Plan Board of Trustees to remove GLP-1s. That is a material number, but it is dwarfed by the change in Medicare Advantage premiums. So this liability is extremely sensitive to various inputs, so it's a little bit hard to pin down. But suffice to say, we need to be putting much more money away against this liability over time than we have. So we've attempted to think about how we incorporate this better into the debt availability numbers at the beginning of the study, but because it's hard to pin down precisely, we haven't felt comfortable doing that. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was well aware of what was going on. Some of you are very well aware and have been on this committee for a long time, but some of you who are newer to it, the debt metrics in the front do not tell the whole picture of the balance sheet of the state. So I wanted to give you some more detail there.
I believe that's the last slide. So that again is just some highlights of the report. Happy pleasure to turn it back over to you if there's any questions for staff.
Sure. So I have a question. So I guess just a punchline question on that is, what is the time horizon of when that debt comes due or starts coming due? When do we turn negative?
So
If you know.
right. Well, the state health plan is a pay-as-you-go plan, essentially, right now. It's round numbers, $4 billion a year, the state health plan. And so this attempts to encapsulate all of those future costs in excess of what we receive. So it comes due slowly over many years. This program will be around, at least for another 70 years if we stopped admitting people today. And we'd have no intention of stopping admitting people. So the bill comes due over a very long period of time. Again, it makes it hard to incorporate that into the headline metrics of debt capacity because it is a very long period and highly sensitive to different inputs which do change.
Do you need a motion to approve the recommended debt affordability study?
We do, but I just want to make sure we give people online a chance if they have any questions, concerns, clarifications. Anyone online?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the report. I would like to see us strengthen the language that's in the report. I guess it's page 32 around structural budget balance. I think it's broader than just structural budget balance and reserve replenishment. Look at what S&P gave us a reading in October of 2024. Their only downside scenario they gave us was a misalignment of revenue and expenditure, making it difficult to achieve. So that's the structural budget. Moody's gave us three factors. First was tax cuts leading to operating deficits that pull available fund balance below 15%. Second was an economic slowdown. And third was significant difficulty passing budgets or other fiscal governance. And I personally would like to see this report reflect some of those more specifics that Moody's gave us rather than just generic statements about structural budget and reserve replenishment, which actually was mentioned by S&P, but not, actually what reserve replenishment wasn't even mentioned by S&P. Put that for everyone's consideration.
So I think you may have made a similar proposal last year, and I think I agree with it last year as well. And that is, let's take the feedback we get from the rating agencies and incorporate it into what we raise in this study. I think that's a sensible suggestion. Does anyone else have thoughts on that?
Just to be clear, Mr. Treasurer, we're speaking just to strengthening the language of number 5 to reflect those. And again, Director Walker had a recommendation change last year. What we did was staff drafted some proposed language and then circulated it for approval. And if that's okay with you, that's I think, the suggestion staff would make for addressing Director Walker's recommendation.
That makes sense to me. Thank you. Anyone else online with thoughts, questions, comments? Okay. With that, I will entertain a motion to approve the study subject to strengthening the language on page 32 to incorporate feedback from Moody's and S&P. I hear a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Walker, second.
This is Mr. Pomeroy. I'll second it.
All right, thank you. We'll call the roll, please.
Okay. I think Director Walker edged you out, I believe, at the second. So we have Woot and Walker to accept the report with the modification language to be circulated. Auditor Bullock.
Aye.
Thank you. And Mr. Roseland.
Aye.
Mr. Akmus.
Aye.
Mr. Gianelli.
Aye.
Mr. Pomeroy.
Aye.
Treasurer Briner.
Aye.
Thank you all. Carries.
Okay, that being our central order of business, do the members have any other matters they'd like to discuss before we adjourn? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Bullock, second. Second. Call the roll, please.
Ms. Walker.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Roseland.
Aye.
Mr. Akmus.
Aye.
Mr. Gianelli.
Aye.
Mr. Pomeroy.
Aye.
Treasurer Briner.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.